Okay. Hello, imaginary viewers. So today I decided that I want to review the NSGC position statements. So there's about, I think 22 of them, so this video will be kind of long, but I have them all written out on these note cards here. So what I figured I'd do is say the title of one, then I'll pause for a little bit in case you want to stop the video and try to answer or like say what the position statement is on your own. It's kind of like a memory jog or kind of a quiz for yourself, and then I'll say what the NSGC position is on each of these issues. So let's start. First is telehealth. The position statement is, genetic counselors are not recognized in Medicare laws and regulations, which prevents genetic counselors from delivering services to Medicare beneficiaries via telehealth. Evidence that high-quality genetic services can be delivered through telehealth. Call for Section 1135 waiver to allow Medicare beneficiaries to access genetic counseling through telehealth during COVID-19. Call for Congress to enact H.R. 3235, which is the Access to Genetic Counselor Services Act, for a long-term solution. Allows genetic counselors to practice independently when serving Medicare beneficiaries. Next up, we have at-home genetic testing. And it says, NSGC advises consumers to consider risks, limitations, psychological implications of genetic testing for themselves and their families before buying a direct-to-consumer test without involvement of a clinical genetics provider. Companies should offer genetic counseling or independent genetics expertise to consumers. Direct-to-consumer companies are responsible for ensuring consumers understand accuracy and reliability of information generated through testing, including interpreted report or raw data files. So raw data files have limitations, like false negatives and false positives, so genetic variants identified in raw data files should be confirmed in a clinical lab before clinical decision-making. NSGC recognizes that direct-to-consumer genetic testing can expand access to genetic testing, but cautions that clinical testing interpreted by healthcare professionals with genetics expertise should be used to inform medical decisions, like preventative care, a diagnosis, or management. I think there's a bug flying around. Okay. Next is newborn screening. Strongly supports as approved by the Department of Health and Human Services. Also supports state-mandated newborn screening. Panels should only include conditions that have undergone evidence review by advisory committee and should meet inclusion criteria from the Advisory Committee on Heritable Disorders in Newborns and Children. Recommends parents to receive information and resources about the newborn screening process from a qualified healthcare provider during prenatal and immediate postnatal periods. Information should indicate that these conditions have significant health risks, that early detection and treatment leads to better health outcomes, that screening may identify carrier status and conditions with variable ages of onset, that follow-up diagnostic testing is necessary to confirm the condition. Okay, next, sort of related to newborn screening, is blood spot storage and use. So supports newborn screening labs to store and use blood spot samples. Transparent policies should regulate these activities. Benefits include contributing to newborn screening and public health advances. It's critical for program quality assurance and improvement, new test development, and IRB-approved research. Parents should be informed of options regarding storage and use, including ability to destroy samples after testing, ability to restrict subsequent use, and opportunity to consent to research use. Next is disability. So NSGC recognizes and celebrates a person's inherent value, includes differences in physical, cognitive, or psychiatric functioning. Individuals to be viewed as a whole person and not defined by others based on a single characteristic. Acknowledges that technological advances in genetics may benefit individuals with disabilities, but may also cause harm or stigma. Policies need to be enacted to protect the rights of those with disabilities and their families. Supports inclusive and non-discriminatory policies to protect rights and autonomy of all individuals, provide opportunity for self-determination, and respect diversity. So I feel like this one is sort of straightforward in that it's just saying everyone's important and it's people first, not disability first. Okay, this one's kind of interesting. Workplace wellness programs. And this is like workplace wellness programs that offer genetic testing. I was a little confused by this at first. Okay. Any request for genetic information from a program must have an evidence base to demonstrate improved health outcomes. Genetic information equals family health history and genetic test results, individuals and family members, like same as Gina. Federal and state regulations should exist to ensure health information is collected securely, not used to discriminate and only used to promote participants' wellness. Employers should never have access to identifiable genetic information. Provision of genetic information should always be voluntary and not subjected to coercion, financial penalty, or inducement. Should have a separate informed consent process and have access to healthcare professionals with genetics expertise. So if you need an example of this, I actually have a friend who works for a university in Philadelphia, and they offered, and she works in like finance, like she helps to raise money from alumni, and her employer gave all the employees a free color test. So that's kind of I think that fits into the workplace wellness program. So yeah, she just like had a free color test, and it's kind of interesting. I think it might thunderstorm. Next, clinical data sharing. Encourages sharing of genetic variant, phenotype, and interpretation data. Sharing in a timely, non-proprietary manner improves accuracy of variant interpretation, allows consistency in variant classification across labs, and facilitates patients' access to optimal medical management and treatment. Databases should protect patient confidentiality and indicate how much evidence underlies any variant classification. Data sharing is in the best interest of patients. The more you know. Oh, shoot. Drop my paperclip. Okay. Human cloning by somatic cell nuclear transfer, or SCNT, for reproductive or therapeutic purposes. Involves replacing the nucleus of an egg cell with the nucleus of a somatic cell from a donor to create a zygote with the same nuclear DNA as the donor. Opposes use of SCNT for reproductive purposes based on ethical concerns, including evidence of decreased reproductive success and lifespan in animals. Supports use of SCNT using human DNA only in circumstances with unique potential for therapy or research. Should be limited to instances when using SCNT adds value that can't be achieved through alternative methods. Requires informed consent from both the egg and DNA donors. Moving along. Incidental findings in genetic testing. When these incidental findings relate to a serious, well-characterized medical risk with implications for clinical care, labs should identify and disclose them to clinicians as part of the return of results process, unless there is a good reason not to. A plan for return of results should be formulated in advance of testing, and the process of pre-test counseling should establish clear expectations for what categories of results will not be returned. Pre-test counseling should elicit patient preferences regarding incidental findings, if possible. Healthcare practitioners conducting the informed consent and return of results should ensure patients have access to providers with genetics expertise. Okay. Family health history in the electronic health record. Supports standards to integrate appropriate family health history information into the electronic health record and strongly encourages collecting a multi-generational family health history, including first, second, and third-degree relatives. EHRs must have the capacity to adapt to genetic and technological advancements as they relate to family health history. Recommends adhering to all relevant federal, state, and local privacy guidelines when documenting a patient's family health history. Explicit consent is needed for including living relatives' identifiable medical records into another patient's EHR, or for electronically accessing a relative's chart. Yeah, so you can't be putting other people's medical information into someone else's EHR. Okay, stem cell research. Supports the use of stem cells in research and clinical settings when practice guidelines adhere to defined ethical and legal guidelines. Available stem cell lines should reflect our genetically diverse population, and donor recruitment should be without discrimination or coercion and include a thorough and dynamic informed consent process. Reproductive freedom. Supports the rights of all individuals and couples to make reproductive choices, including testing, to decide whether to pursue a pregnancy, to utilize assisted reproductive technologies, to prepare for the birth and future needs of their offspring, to make an adoption plan, or to end a pregnancy. Reproductive decisions should be made in the context of unbiased and comprehensive information, free from discrimination or coercion. Prenatal testing for adult onset conditions. Does not recommend prenatal testing for adult onset conditions if pregnancy or childhood management will not be affected. Recommend that parents undergo genetic counseling to discuss implications of prenatal testing for adult onset conditions prior to testing. Pre-test counseling should include natural history, availability of treatments and interventions, ethical concerns about a child's autonomy, and genetic discrimination. Genetic testing of children in the adoption process. Okay. Support collecting health information, medical, genetic, family history for children entering the adoption process. Concerns that arise about genetic conditions should be relayed to genetics specialists to determine if testing is appropriate. Decisions about testing should be made on the child's current medical needs and not used to decide whether or not to adopt the child. That would be kind of mean. Prior to finalizing the adoption, recommend that adoption agency or representative confirm biological and adoptive parents' preferences for recontacting them regarding genetic testing results or medically significant family history. Okay, we're cruising right along. Use of multi-gene panels. Endorses the use of multi-gene panels when clinically warranted and appropriately applied. Panels can be a comprehensive and efficient route to identify a genetic cause of disease. Before ordering, providers should evaluate analytical and clinical validity and clinical utility. Other factors to consider: family history, gene content of the panel, limitations of sequencing and informatics technology, variant interpretation, and reporting practices. Highlights importance of experts like genetic counselors in educating stakeholders about appropriate usage of technology to mitigate risk of patient harm and unnecessary costs to healthcare system. 1 second. Thunder. Supports straightforward and transparent pricing so patients, providers, labs, healthcare plans can weigh value of panel testing in the weight of the cost. So yeah, hopefully I can finish this before it starts thunderstorming. genetic testing of minors for adult onset conditions. So this is different than the prenatal testing for adult onset conditions. Yeah, it's like definitely clouding up. We can do it. Encourage deferring predictive genetic testing of adult onset conditions when results will not impact childhood medical management or significantly benefit the child. Optimally be deferred until individual has the capacity to weigh associated risks, benefits, and limitations of the information and can take their own circumstances, preferences, and beliefs into account to preserve autonomy and right to an open future. Decision to undergo testing that could identify variants for adult onset conditions, either specifically or secondarily, like via genome sequencing, should be made cautiously and with appropriate assent of minor whenever possible. If minor undergoes testing and results are not disclosed to the child, provider should discuss strategies with parents or guardians for sharing results as he or she develops the capacity or by age of majority. Strongly recommends that families facing decisions to test minors meet with genetic counselor or other provider with genetics expertise to review clinical and personal implications of testing. Okay. Regulation of genetic testing. Supports regulation of DNA testing for health-related conditions and hereditary diseases for clinical use. Any decision to regulate testing should be patient-focused and consider potential risk of stifling technological advances that are critical to the fields of genetics, genomics, and precision medicine. Regulation should not impede patient access to high-quality, clinically useful information. Goals should include protecting patients from undue harm by developing clinical utility and analytical validity programs, ensuring that practitioners correctly interpret results and create transparency in the use or intended application of a genetic test. Okay. Human germline editing. Recognizes that new and emerging gene editing techniques may be a means to prevent, ameliorate, or cure genetic disease. Concerns about risk or unacceptable uses must be balanced with benefits that they may bring into individuals and families affected, or that they may bring to individuals and families affected by genetic disease. Supports public funding for research that investigates the potential of germline editing in a manner that is regulated, transparent, and equitable. Supports funding for research into social and ethical implications of germline editing, including stakeholder and community engagement. Germline editing is in human sperm, eggs, or embryos with the intention of creating a pregnancy should be considered only if and when safety and efficacy standards have been established and met. Does not support human germline editing for clinical use at this time. Prenatal cell-free DNA screening. Supports cell-free DNA screening as an option for pregnancy patients. Cannot definitively diagnose or rule out genetic conditions, so qualified providers should communicate benefits and limitations to patients prior to testing. Many factors impact cell-free DNA screening performance, so it may not be the most appropriate option for every pregnancy. Prior to having screening, patients should have the opportunity to meet with a qualified provider who can facilitate individualized discussion of patients' values and needs, including option to decline all screening or proceed directly to diagnostic testing. Providers with expertise in screening should provide post-test counseling to patients with increased risk results. Diagnostic testing should be offered to patients with increased risk results to facilitate informed decision-making. We only have 5 left. Family health history. This is different from family health history in the electronic medical record, which we already did. Recommends joint collection of family health history by patients and healthcare providers in routine and specialty medical care. Extent of information collected will vary based on primary care versus specialty setting. Collection and annual review of family health history allows for risk assessment and can aid with diagnosis, healthcare decisions, screening, genetic or other test selection, and an interpretation of test results as well as identify at-risk relatives. Use of patient family history tools, condition checklists, published pedigree symbols can facilitate patient and provider collection of relevant information. Oh, and these ones are all short. Human gene patenting. So it supports the Supreme Court's ruling in the Myriad case that synthetic DNA is patent eligible, but naturally occurring human DNA sequences may not be patented. Facilitates competitive pricing of testing to benefit public and supports genomic medicine services and development of novel ideas and technologies. Direct access to genetic testing. People interested in direct-to-consumer testing have the right to make informed, independent decision to pursue that or not. Companies have a responsibility to offer easy access and/or referral to appropriate resources and qualified professionals. Non-discrimination. No individual should be discriminated against based on information obtained from tests or family history. Supports GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008, safeguards for employment and medical insurance. Should encompass all individuals in all circumstances. No person should forego medical care, genetic testing, or participation in research and clinical trials out of fear that genetic information may be used against them or family members. Okay, last one. Genetic counselors in healthcare reform. Genetic counselors are uniquely trained providers to deliver risk assessment, comprehensive genetic counseling, and to ensure appropriate utilization of genetic tests, but are not recognized by all payers, including Medicare and Medicaid. Policies should promote patient access to board-certified genetic counselors. Urges enactment of federal legislation to designate board-certified genetic counselors as practitioners by CMS. Advocates for all health plans to provide access to services. That's it. We made it through all of the NSGC position statements. So I know that some of them are kind of long, but in reading these, I feel like I feel like it's kind of common sense, and definitely things that we've talked about in school before, and just like things you wouldn't do as a genetic counselor, so like not coercing people, really emphasizing patient autonomy, and like not using genetic technology for bad reasons. So I don't know what the questions will be like regarding the position statements, but I feel like on a multiple choice test, you would definitely be able to noodle it out, which, just like, which is the most chill answer? Like, what would you do as a genetic counselor? You wouldn't be mean to people with disabilities. So anyways, I hope that helped. Maybe just listening to position statements in my soothing voice will help you remember them. But it is cloudy now, and I think it's going to rain on me. So I'll see you all later.